Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Mike Brancatelli. This is Psychedelic. Of course, you know that already if you're tuning in. If you're new, that's what you're listening to. I mean, you clicked on it somehow. You've known. You're not just floating in a endless abyss of infinite podcast land, and then just all of a sudden Psychedelic just starts playing somewhere, and you're like, what is this? Who is this? How did this get on? Why is this guy talking? Why is this guy still talking? You know, something like that. So, yeah, I should stop introducing the show with the title and my name. There's really no need to do that. You guys are grown adults. You're all intelligent. You know what you clicked on. You know what you're listening to. Maybe I'll do it like a book, where like a book, there's like a title at the top that tells you, like every book always has the name of the book on like the left-hand side, and then the name of the chapter on the top. Maybe I'll do that for the podcast, just like every 30 seconds. Be like, you're listening to Psychedelic. I'm Mike Brancatelli. I suppose they did that in radio, too. WNBC. You're listening to the hottest jams of the West Coast, 99.9 KFNM Hot Rock. I remember when I was growing up, there was a station called K-Rock in New York, and yeah, there would always be like the guy. I always thought, yeah, that was it. That was one station. I remember and then there was Hot 97, and I always thought like there was I think there was only like one white guy that worked at Hot 97, and he was just the guy that did the voice that was, you're listening to Hot 97, the most fire beats bumping from West Coast to East Coast hip hop. Hot 97. Friday night, Funk Master Flex night. That was a nice night. Funk Flex on the ones and twos, dropping fire beats, dropping bombs. Funk Flex would drop bombs. That's what he would do. He would play a song. And then he would get so worked up about how good the song was. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't handle himself anymore. He would be like, oh no, I got to take that one back. And sometimes he would take it back a couple different times. I remember one time, I think it was, I don't know if it was 50 Cent or G Unit, and he was like, oh man, that beat is ridiculous. We got to take that back. And he was like, and then he would drop a bomb, and it'd be like, and then the white guy would come on and be like, Funk Master Flex night. And then he'd be like, we got to drop another bomb. We got to take that back. And he would take it back again, and he would give it a little mix. The good old days of radio. But not anymore. We're in podcast land. Podcast land where anybody can have a podcast about anything, and anybody can listen to it, and you know what you're listening to. You're here. You're with me. You're with Psychedelic. Thanks for being here and listening to me talk about psychedelics, consciousness, Funk Master Flex, I don't know, pepperoni pizza sometimes, probably my death row meal. Yeah, so I'm not going to do like a whole thing on this one, I think, about stuff going on and all that kind of stuff. I just want to get this out. I had a great conversation with Wyan. Not going to edit that out. I took his last name and I put it on to the first part of his first name, Ryan Westrum. And Ryan is, a fantastic individual. He's been listening to the show and following my work. I mean, I just can't. I'm so filled with gratitude and love that people that are wanting to be on the show, that are doing good things like Ryan, that are also fans and listening. Man, it just all goes around. You know, the love and the support and the gratitude. It's all cyclical. It's all going around. Reciprocity, I guess, is the word for it, right? So yeah, Ryan is the co-author of the Psychedelics Integration Handbook, which is awesome. It's so awesome, and he sent it to me, and I have been kind of skimming through it here and there, and I almost kind of feel bad that I haven't like mastered it yet, before our conversation, but it's like 400 pages, and it's like never ending because it's a workbook too, and of course I'm integrating, so I'm using it. And it's so great because you can write in it, and as Ryan says, you'll hear him say, make it your own. I mean, that's really it's just it's amazing. And these amazing quotes by James Fadiman and Stanislav Grof, just fully endorsing the book and saying it's just like the most amazing thing in the whole world. And it really truly is. I mean, I can't tell you you open it up. I just open it to any. I'll do it right now. Open it to any page right now. And what are we talking about? We're talking about colonization, reconciling. The colonizer part wants to keep itself safe and in control. The process, not an event. Like these are, I don't know. To me, it's just like, wow. Okay, another page. Active imagination, synchronicity, archetypes, symbols, dreams. The history. Talking about Groff, Maria Sabina, Carl Jung, cannabis, everything. Questions, like a frequently asked questions section. What do I do if I'm, if I'm taking this substance or that substance? How to work with your shadow. Points about the psychedelic renaissance that's going on right now. Facilitation, addiction. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I'm sorry, I'm kind of having one of those like where I'm not really burping, but almost things as I'm doing that. Apologize. But it's really truly an amazing work. And so if you're interested in psychedelic journeying, which I believe you probably are, get the Psychedelics Integration Handbook. I mean, it's fantastic. Talking about Akashic fields, Sanskrit records, Hinduism. It's just, I mean, endless. Subatomic levels, astrology. It goes on and on and on and on and on. It's really, it's everything. Anyway, so that's it. I just wanted to say that because I'm just impressed. I'm impressed, and I'm also like, I wish I could have done more to have, like, I feel like we could have had a better conversation if I like really dug into it front and back. But I opened to some sections that I felt was, appealing to me. And, it's difficult. I'm doing the show, and a lot of people send me pamphlets and books and things that they want me to read and all this kind of stuff. But, now after talking to Ryan, having the book, I'm so glad that he sent me the book, and I have it to work with. We're going to do a part 2 because there's so much to dive into. So we just scratched the tip of the iceberg on this one. But Dr. Ryan Westrum is a nationally recognized psychedelic integration expert. He's been working in this field for 15 years. His primary focus has been working with individuals and groups. He facilitates experiential therapy sessions and integrates psychedelic journeys, helping people to heal and really transform their lives, figure out where they're stuck and how to move forward and how to plug in what they've learned from these altered states experiences into waking life, three-dimensional, physical, meat suit consciousness reality. And he speaks on, like I said, tons of topics that, like, it's filled up in the book, dreamwork, integration therapy, all kinds of things. He's the founder of healingsoulsllc.com, psychedelicintegration.net. He's also a Psychedelic Integration on Instagram. Follow him there. And he offers a multitude of models ranging from hypnosis to various forms of breathwork practices to therapy in working with wholeness in yourself. And he's a registered integration therapist for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS. He's on the map, as well as the co-author of this amazing book. So, check it out. You could go to his website to get the book, psychedelicintegration.net. It's also available on Amazon, I suppose. But, go support it buy it from the local, get it from the source. It's great. I really, this is one of those conversations where, it's just there's so much. You'll see. We'll get into some stuff. Oftentimes I'm thinking, oh man, I wish I had as much of depth of knowledge and experience as Ryan does, but I guess that's why he's on the show. So I ask the questions, but I know I could step it up, I think, and I think we're going to dive even deeper on the part 2, because like I said, there's just so much here. All right, that's pretty much it. If you love and if you love the show, if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com. You can donate $1 a month. Patreon.com/Mike Brank. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating and review. And what's someone left a 5-star review. They said, silly name, great show. I mean, I don't know, the name, whatever. The name of the show is just the name of the show. I'm Mike Brancatelli. The show is Mikeadelic. I don't go around saying to people, hey, I'm Mikeadelic. Oh yeah, I'm a psychedelic guy. I'm just, I don't know. I was trying to think of a name for the show, and I was thinking like, oh, what's the name? Like On the Fringes of Reality, like the noosphere of the nexus of the noosphere, like fractalization and fragmentation of the infinite cosmic soup. Like I just kept thinking of all these things. I'm like, just sounds too sounds like I'm trying too hard, too complicated, pretentious. I don't know. So I was like, all right, one day I just thought, all right, what about Mycadelic? That works. But I'm having thoughts, not just because of this one person who left a 5-star review, by the way, and thank you for leaving a 5-star review, who said, silly name, great show. But I'm thinking, is the name of the show maybe preventing people from who aren't psychedelic, like from getting into the show? Because I kind of want to bring more people in. I want to invite more people in. I don't want to necessarily turn people away. I want to make, and you guys, longtime listeners of the show, know, it's not always revolving around psychedelics, right? Like one of my friends the other day was listening to a conversation I had with JP Sears on the show, Ultra Spiritual. We didn't talk about psychedelics once. I've had Thaddeus Russell on the show. We didn't talk about psychedelics really at all, except for he told me he had a bad trip with mushrooms and it's not really his thing. So, okay, but I'm interested in all kinds of things and all kinds of people. I mean, I had the factory farm guy on the show, that just did different things, different kinds of different. What do you call the thing that encompasses all that? Like, I don't know, like a conscious portal or something. So the conscious lens, whatever. But let me know. Should I change the show name? Do you think it's not? Do you think it's keeping people away? Do you think people are unable to, like, you know what I mean? Like, is there a barrier because it's like mycadelic and there's like a triangle with an eye in it, and people are just like, oh, this is probably some weird psychedelic thing, and it kind of is, but it's also a lot more than that. So let me know what you think. Love me, support the show, love the show. I love you. Barney, we all love each other. I love you, you love me. We're a happy family. Mr. Rogers, take your shoes off when you come in my house. Introduce yourself to your neighbors. Say hello to them. Just say hi. Say what your name is. Just how many people live in places where you don't even know the people around you. Just say hi to them. All right. I don't know where I'm going with this. That's pretty much it. I'm doing my first inaugural. Is it inaugural? No, first launch, the Mind Jam tonight. So that's going to be cool. And looking forward to that at the Denver Psychedelic Club. What else? I don't know. Just enjoy this conversation. Let me know what you think. Reach out to me. I haven't been on social media so much. Warning. I haven't been on social media so much because I have a social media addiction, and it's bad. I waste time on social media. I look at things that I probably shouldn't be looking at, or that just don't serve me and aren't productive to my vision and mission. And I don't like it. I feel shitty. After. And like sometimes I'll fall into like jealousy and comparison, and I don't want to do that. I mean, yeah, sure, maybe that's on me and I got a lot of work to do, but I think right now putting social media outside of my of access so much. So I've set like time limits on how much I could use and locked it on my phone. Really actually revolutionized my phone. Shout out to Tristan Harris. If you don't know who Tristan Harris is, I'd like to get him on the podcast. Maybe someone could like tweet at him. By the way, that's a great way to get people on the podcast. If you want me to talk to somebody, like just tag me in a post or a tweet or Instagram thing and just be like, hey, you got to talk to this guy, this lunatic. And Tristan Harris has this great website. I forget what the name is, but Google Tristan Harris. He tells you basically good ways to organize your smartphone, turn it to grayscale, move things in folders, set time limits, disable Siri search, like all this useful stuff to prevent time sucks and wastes on your phone, because it's bad, for a lot of people. So I haven't been on social media so much. And, I guess maybe people that have messaged me, I haven't gotten back to them, or I didn't do a good job maybe like promoting some things. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not going to be on social media as much anymore. And, I could hear Gary V, shouting and be like, you kidding me? You got to be on social media, TikTok, bro, LinkedIn, it's where it's at. What are you doing? You're a piece of shit. If you're not on social media, you might as well, go to the fucking graveyard, dig 6 feet in and jump in, just bury yourself, dude. It's fucking over, man. No complaining. hustle and grind it all away, grind yourself into a little fucking, coffee pellet, put it, all right. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I haven't been on social media so much. So I don't know. Here's the podcast. This is what I'm doing. I love podcasting. I love talking to people. Everything else, not so much. So without further ado, let's get in this conversation with Dr. Wine. I did it again. Dr. Ryan Westrum.
Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open to us the possibility that everything we know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Or is it perception?
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity.
Listening to Noah about synchronicity, and I just love the flow of you guys. You're just like, and sometimes what's super funny is the conversation is just like classic psychedelic where it's going into 18 different directions at once, and you're like,
yeah,
all following it simultaneously, right?
Maybe I should rename my show 8 Different Directions at Once. I don't know. I tend to do that a lot. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah, so when I was writing it, that's to go back to what you were saying, is it's written for like my 12-year-old self. So I started really young. I was grateful to have people in my life that protected me and hanging out with older kids. I had a real cosmic experience with psilocybin and just not knowing what to do with it. I just integrated on my own and books fell in my lap. I was grateful to come across Stanislav Grof's book, Psychotherapy, LSD Psychotherapy, reading the Kool-Aid acid test. So I have a little bit of, deadhead in me. It's a balance of, the merry pranksters and like this therapeutic. So I do advocate for recreational use. I love the therapeutic value of it, Mike, but it's a balance, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, and like, Groff says, like they're tools, and it's like they can be used in a number of different ways, all the way from, having a little microdose, taking a little bit at a concert, to like conjuring dark sorcery and sigil magic, or like, the range of use on these things is like, they're not inherently good, but they're not inherently anything. They're just tools, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, don't get me started on Crowley and tarot cards. I'll be like doing LSD and like, here, let's pull out the tarot, and they'll be like, no, dark magic. So it's wonderful. I think they're spontaneous catalysts for growth, and if anything, exploration of self, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no. So, I mean, I did use the book in that way. Like I was poking around and looking at different things. I mean, the section of Groff and Jung and mythology and archetypes and astrology and stuff, like I found to be really interesting because, at first I was just like, okay, yeah, like integration. Like I've been hearing a lot about integration. A lot of people are talking about integration, but I want to read something from the book if I can, real quick, because I think it's just awesome. So this is from Dr. James Fadiman, author of the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. He says, "This is without a doubt the most comprehensive and detailed book on psychedelic integration available. In addition, it is far more. Rather than being no more than an excellent manual of methods, which it is, it goes into great depth about every method, presents alternatives to almost every activity, includes a history of how and from who the methods developed, and then facilitates readers in making their own choices, how to proceed through self-directed questions and practices." And he goes on to say more. But really, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's like 500 pages, and there's everything in here. There's practices, there's modes that you can do. Like you have these certain kinds of exercises, journaling aspects. So I guess, yeah, walk me through, because this seems like, would it be safe to say that this is sort of like a representation of your life's work?
It would be, yeah. I think the most important thing when we wrote this book, and the humbling statement that Dr. Fadiman wrote is just amazing, and it really means a lot to me. The work in this book is designed to personalize psychedelic integration. It's my life's work, as I alluded to from an early age, working with these medicines, but it's giving a profound opportunity for anybody to make it their own. I want people to be able to look at psychedelic integration and go, okay, this is what I want to do with it. This is what's working for me, and this is what's not. All the while making it extremely practical. I think what we're losing sight of sometimes within the psychedelic realm is the lack of practicality. Like, what are we going to actually do and bring back? You know, we still need to know our zip code. We still need to know, like, okay, bills are paid on this day, and how can we integrate that into life? How we relate to people? It's all fundamentally important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what would be the purpose other than to integrate, right? You can't live in that realm. You know, I mean, as much as maybe one would want to, or maybe we're going to, but it wouldn't even be us. It would be different, right? So, and it's like consuming psychedelics is a symbiotic kind of participatory experience, right? I mean, we have to kind of be involved with these things have to be involved with us to be functional, right?
I love that you use the term symbiosis, because I advocate for walking with it and integrating how it's talking to us as well as us integrating with it. And it's a dialogue. It's a symbiotic dialogue for sure, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about, like a lot of people's, you know, there's obviously a lot of people say a lot of things, but, you know, there's a phrase that a lot of people throw out there from Alan Watts, which is, once you get the message, hang up the phone. And I, you know, I'm not so sure about that myself. I mean, I think it makes sense to a degree. I don't think it's an all encompassing phrase for everything. As you were saying, you make it personal, you make it for yourself. Have you heard that before? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a great statement, and it's used a lot in this integration office. Is, okay, how much do we need to work with it? How much sobriety do we need under our belt? And the conversation of when do we hang up the phone is super vital. But the argument, taking it both ways, is, am I looking at everything? Am I actually using these sessions, be it therapeutically, or are we using recreational experiences with action, right? Are we actually trying to cultivate something, or are we just doing it passively? Okay, because then you could hang up the phone and you're like, well, I need to do it more. And a lot of people in my office will say that I'm seeking more. I feel compelled to do more. Well, then the catch-22 is what are we looking at? What are we looking to get more? You know, the antidote to that question would be, Mike, okay, well, what are we looking for, right? And that brings up intention. That brings up, because, as you know, if we're going to hang up the phone, then we've seen enough space aliens, or we've seen God, or we've understand the divine of a 5-MeO experience, right? Then maybe we just need some rest. I would argue hanging up the phone is maybe we haven't integrated it all, or maybe we're not practicing it in real life.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's like, you know, hang it up, but then you pick it back up when you're ready. Like, you can't take the test if you haven't studied, or you can, but you might fail, right? I mean, totally. I remember in school, sometimes I wouldn't do the homework. I'd ace the test and I'd be like, oh, I figured this out, but I didn't really do the homework. So I wasn't really getting the depth and breadth of knowledge and experience that one would get when diving into that. And this is interesting because, you know, for my journeying, it oftentimes comes up where I say, oh yeah, I've healed that kind of trauma that I had from childhood. I've seen that parental kind of stuff, and I've been there. But like a tree with its roots going in every different directions, there's all these pieces that I didn't see at hidden layers and hidden depths. So yeah, it's sort of never ending, right? I mean, it's like, it's a never ending thing.
Well, I'm the first one to advocate I know nothing, and that's because of psychedelics. It's too profound. I remember a journey I had where I was just downloaded with what was like a DNA helix times 1 billion. And I just said, you know, I just put my hands in the air, Mike, and I was like, No, there's plenty to explore in this realm. There's
Yeah.
plenty to explore in this universe. There's plenty to explore in our biological healing and our biographical storytelling. It's about the courage that we have, the safety that we can build with the community is really archetypal too, right? It's important to be able to say, hey, I'm going to dive into this, but I better have a safe environment or group of people to be working with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I kind of want to back up a little bit, Ryan, and just kind of address the word of integration too, because like I said, it kind of gets thrown around a lot, and and I see some people talking about it in ways that don't touch on the depths in which you're going to here. And then there's maybe misconceptions, and you probably get this too, right? Like, and you make this distinction in the book where you say, the difference between integration and aftercare. So, maybe just for the people that are listening out there who aren't necessarily totally familiar with what integration is, or maybe they've heard it and they kind of know, what would be your definition of what psychedelic integration looks like?
I believe psychedelic integration is an active process. And the first and foremost thing is active, meaning that it's physical embodied, it's cognitively embodied, and it's emotionally embodied. I talk a lot about unlocking all three of those. Mm-hmm. Similar to a cup of coffee is your physical body might want it, but your emotions, or you're not ready for it because it's 10 o'clock at night. And I sound like I'm digressing here for a second, but integration is important because we need to unlock our physical integration within the experience, the emotional integration within the experience, and the cognitive explanation of what we just had. And if we can interweave all three of those, all the while talking about, okay, what is it that's heartfelt and most important to be processing now? So the differentiation of integration and aftercare is we're trying to really kind of chew on it or cultivate it. I love using a garden as an analogy for that, right? Is what needs to be looked on with more focus. Some plants need more tender care. Some plants need more light. Some plants need different soil types. It's all about really exploring that nuance of each and every experience. Every psychedelic experience, be it an ayahuasca ceremony or a 5-MeO experience or a large psilocybin, is going to bring up different ways that we're going to need to integrate these.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it depends on where you go with those too. Right. Like, I mean, maybe you had a spiritual emergence and, maybe you had like a really totally profound experience, or maybe you just had something that was kind of challenging to the body. Yeah. So it really depends on the depth of the experience as well, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that speaks on what ends up coming out. We don't know what we're going to be integrating until after the experience and what's still meandering through our consciousness, right? I recently just was talking to an integrative client of mine that's dealing with chronic depression. And they thought the classic, bullshit one-hit pill is, oh, I'm going to come back and everything's going to be fluffy cotton candy and unicorns. And the unfortunate nature is he didn't have any time to prep. And not to say that my services were necessary, but someone should have shared with him that that's where the work is going to be done, is through the preparation and the integration. The session is, it's convoluted. We don't know what's going to come up. And then as a clinician or a support staff, you have to go, okay, what are you digesting? What is the problem? We need to find what is that you're chewing on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always like the analogy because it just fits. It just makes so much sense of like, I mean, it's called, people call it taking a tripping. And when you go on vacation, I mean, it's the same thing, like I remember when I went to Thailand, I bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok. Like I really prepared for that, experience. Like I prepared, I packed, like I was ready to go and I didn't know what I was going to encounter. And I kind of didn't really know who I was going to be when I came back. But yeah, similar thing. It's like if you're not preparing, you're just kind of like going to the airport, getting on a plane with no luggage, no suitcase, and no idea of what you're doing or where you're going or what to,
Right.
So yeah, I love that analogy. It just it fits for me.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So yeah, and then one of the things I found fascinating too that I didn't really know, but I guess I had an inclination of, and what you put in the book was how much Stanislav Grof has gone beyond what Jung has gone beyond Freud, and what Grof has done has gone beyond Jung in terms of working with non-ordinary states of consciousness. I was wondering maybe if you could like touch on some of that a little bit, because I'm pretty familiar with Grof, but I'm not super, I haven't like really dug into a lot of his stuff. I mean, I kind of like have heard things like on side pieces and stuff, but.
Right. So I had the privilege of authoring this book with Jay, and Jay and I found Stan holotropic breathwork community to be profoundly supportive, and he created holotropic breathwork in the prohibition of psychedelics in the 70s and 80s, and he's still using holotropic breathwork as an integrative exercise. But Dr. Groff got LSD from Albert Hofmann and Sandoz Laboratory. So this man is like a preliminary figure in the LSD movement, sitting for over 4,000 clinical legal sessions. And as he did that, he realized that there was all these maps of consciousness, is what he describes, be it the perinatal matrices of rebirthing, the biographical or biological explanation of what our birth is. And they were all being played out within an LSD experience. He also started to recognize, as one of the founders of transpersonal psychology, psychology outside of oneself, that we are archetypes that are beyond cognitive or collective archetypes. That it's like a point where we are becoming something that has past lives, that we've learned about past lives in psychedelic experiences, that we've learned about biographical trauma that could be healed. And throughout his conversations with his clients and his patients, he started to recognize that the LSD and the psychedelics was healing because it was giving the individual perspective and a map. So you could start to feel what it was like to go through this journey, almost as the hero's journey, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think that...
go ahead and keep going.
Oh, no.
I was just going to say the last thing, which is priority, is that these are catalysts, right? For us to be aware of what's going on. He loves to say they're spontaneous catalysts that we're developing to heal ourselves, right? That it's unique to our karma.
Yeah. But within that, there are these certain patterns, right, that he's identified. I think it was the 4 patterns of the psyche.
Yeah, so he talks about it as what's called the perinatal matrices, and there's 4 of them. Yeah, and he coined it the BPMs, and there's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and each one is identified to part of the birth order. One is the amniotic fluid sitting in the womb. The second one is the constriction starting in the birth canal. The third perinatal matrices is when the constrictions start to get more and more rapid and the potential for birth is coming. And then the fourth one is the classic birth, or what he then identifies as a death rebirth. And these can either come linearly through a psychedelic experience, or what he says is identified in a cyclical manner. And at any given moment, you could be stuck in one of them. And stuck meaning, the assigned meaning being that you're in it, right? So I've had experiences where I'm in psilocybin journeys and just in the womb for the whole journey. And you start to recognize a connection, Mike, where for myself, and I only speak for myself and not my clients, I was 30 days late. So I was late baby. And so I can always identify with this womb-like feeling of like, hey, I don't need to go anywhere. I'm super chill. Whereas when I start to get into that third perinatal matrices of the constriction, I'm challenged by it because it was new to me. And so then I start to talk to clients about it, and they're like, they can recognize, and they'll go back to their mother or their birth experience and identify psychedelic things that they witnessed in their birth. And so they're really reliving it.
Wow.
Phenomenal. And they come out flush and they look like they're 15 years younger. It's pretty mind-boggling.
And you've had experiences like that too?
Yeah, personally, I've had a couple of experiences where I've felt, actually, I have 2 beautiful daughters, and I've felt one of them had the umbilical cord wrapped around their neck. So I could actually feel in my psychedelic experience the empathy of what that was like for my daughter to go through being born with the umbilical cord wrapped around their neck. it was almost transformational and a karmic bond. It was quite intense.
Yeah. So does something like that leave a lasting imprint on the child?
Yes, without a doubt. And so it's a very great question. And what ends up happening is you'll start to see that manifest in the psychedelic experience, where they might want to like put their hands around their neck, or they might start coughing or choking. And what's constantly reported, Mike, is that they go, "Oh, I felt as if I couldn't breathe." And we keep exploring that in an integration session and talking about it. And then all of a sudden they'll have this memory as if it was like a dream. And then it's corroborated by their parent to say, "Oh yeah, you had the umbilical cord wrapped around your neck." And it might play out for years and years and years. It might play out once and be done, but it can manifest physically within the experience, which is an advocacy for, a healthy sitter to protect the person.
Sure. And so would that be considered trauma?
It could possibly, birth trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, birth trauma. Wow.
Yeah. And that's where Graf, I think, bypasses Freud and Jung. It's not the tabula rasa that Freud says we're born with, that we're born with these imprints through birth, through past lives. And that's happened as well. I've seen people literally fighting it out on like a battlefield in like some Norwegian battle that they experienced in the psychedelic world, and they come out and they have a shoulder surgery that they had in this lifetime, that they felt a past life go right through their experience. It's intense.
Yeah, I mean, I had what I'm calling a past life experience, and it happened in an ayahuasca ceremony. And there was a lot of things that connect to the experience, but basically I was in Egypt, and it's kind of a long story, but basically I was basically like sacrificed or like killed in like the public square.
Wow.
And they were like ripping my intestines out, but I was born with a scar on my stomach. Like a small like mark, like right on like the bottom part of my abdomen.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a ton of other things that happen too, but
yeah. So Graf would say, and in my work, and that's what I articulate. And thank you so much for sharing that. It's a beautiful story, and I think there's truth in it, and that's a large aspect of integration, is letting the person understand that as their truth. We don't know. I mean, anyone that says, I get just alarmingly upset with people that try to position of this is what it is, this is what it isn't. The individual that experiences the psychedelic session, that's their truth. And so your story is beautiful. And if that relates to you as a spiritual emergence or connecting and gives you peace, well, fuck. Why would someone try to take away that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And yeah, it that makes so much sense. I just like the way that you kind of, said that in that way, because it's like, well, yeah, who is anybody else to say like what is and what isn't, right? I mean, these experiences are supremely personal. And like you were mentioning the last podcast that I had, talking about synchronicities and, these kinds of things that happen. We live in a magical world. I mean, it really is, if you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we want it to be, and that seems to be. It seems to be things flow a little bit more easily, and that there's more of a sense of meaning and purpose when you accept the kind of magical world that we live in, rather than this sort of just closed case, materialist, reductionist kind of view.
Right. And I think that begs to even being played out in psychedelic sessions is people's control and power. If they choose to shut off the answers or the opportunities to explore, it's their control and power that they're fighting against. And maybe it's what they were taught, maybe it was the dogma that they were introduced to consciously or unconsciously. But the large aspect of what I hear you saying is that freedom of exploring and then surrendering to the unknown. I mean, at the end of the day, who are we to say what the answer is?
Yeah. And so you fighting our power, that sounds interesting. Like, and I feel like I can relate to this as well, because I think I've had some experiences like that. And I can't really identify what it would be. Why would anyone want to fight the ability to have ultimate power and to make decisions and choose for themselves? Where would that kind of thing come from?
One of the examples that is suicidal ideation, or identifying with a personality characteristic. So an aspect of my profession is we as therapists or clinical psychologists are supposed to diagnose, right? And if the individual has a diagnosis, then they feel as if there's some sort of assigned meaning to their disorder or their lifestyle or their personality. Well, I'm the opposite. I don't want to assign a meaning of what that is. It's separate of who we are. And so fighting the power, when I say that, Mike, I'm talking about they're trying to hold on to their identity, their ego, for lack of better terms, their ego structure,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so if they have suicidal ideation, my heart goes out to them, because what they want to do is, if we break that with a psychedelic session, or if they're challenged with a different vantage point, immediately that's going to challenge their core script of who they are. And if they don't have integration or an understanding of putting that back together in a more healthy, holistic way, they're actually losing a part of who they were or who they thought they were, even if it was depression or even if it was with suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
And so it's important to kind of meander that golden thread for them and say, okay, we're losing parts of who we identified as, but that's not serving us. Let's release that power and control of holding on to it.
Right. So would that be like tied up into a fear of death? I mean, it is a death, right?
Yeah. And as you know, because you looked at the book, but that's what the end is, that we, in kind of an existential kind of manner with a little sadism, is designing your own death, right? That's the ultimate reason why we're here, is finding purpose, but also being comfortable with what's the outcome, what's going to happen.
Inevitable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we live in a world that really puts it under the rug and doesn't pay the respect to the death process.
Mm-hmm.
In what I feel in the kind of mainstream way, it's just I grew up Catholic. I went to like the Catholic funerals, and everyone's like, "Oh, somber and in a suit." Like, man, I want my death to be a party. Like, I want it to be a celebration. Like, I want people to be like excited, celebrating the life that was passing into the other one. But we have such a perverted view of that, and it's really in this kind of fear-based paradigm, because you can really control a lot of people with the fear of death, right? But it's coming. It's here. I mean, I could die right now. Who knows?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's lovely what you just said, is being able to throw the party and the expression of. And it's not to minimize the importance of why we're here. I think that's one of the conundrums people have, is if they think they're honoring death, it means there's some, depressed, morbid nihilist. But really what you are is you're just expressive. You're living life. And that's what I've found within the work as well, is these individuals who have death anxiety, be it with stage 4 cancer, or that they're just so fearful of losing control of the life experience, they come out of these experiences with psychedelics with a much more profound gratitude for living in this impermanent world, day to day, with the simplicity, with the mindfulness and presence, knowing that, one day it's on the horizon, but in the meantime, they're going to live.
Yeah, totally. And one day it is on the horizon, but like it could happen at any point in time. Although we're sort of conditioned in this mind, in this kind of monotony sort of a lot of people's lives, of just kind of wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch a little Netflix, go back to, and that's just sort of the program that we're in or whatever. So a psychedelic experience could really rattle that cage. I remember hearing Paul Stamets say on Joe Rogan's podcast about when his father was dying, and his father had never had a psychedelic experience, and he was debating about whether to give him psilocybin, but he ultimately chose not to, because he didn't want his father to experience like regret or any of this thing. It's an interesting concept, because I oftentimes think about how much my parents could benefit from a psychedelic experience, how much love and connection we could have as a family coming together and sharing in that beauty. but I don't know. I'm not like giving up hope, but I'm just saying it doesn't seem like it's going to happen, and it could really rock their entire worlds completely.
Yeah, I would love to kind of expound on that, and with deep appreciation for the Changing of the Mind book by Michael Pollan. That's really influenced, I think, a lot of people that don't know the magnitude of psychedelics. And so to carry over what Paul said about his father, I would agree. I think people have to find the medicine on their own. People have to find the psychedelic experience with emotional intelligence, with an educational background of the magnitude of all the things that could happen, be it existential crises, spiritual emergence, or profound challenges. I mean, really, and this is a vague number, but like 90% of clients that are integrating with me are like, it's rocked my world. Well, the people that can handle that cataclysmic change are because they've done the preparation work and the integration. When Michael's book came out, it opened the door to a bunch of people that I don't think are ready for it, without reading more about the literature, more about the historical perspective, more about, and that's a part of what my book is doing too, is educating all the things you need before you take a 6-hour journey with psilocybin or LSD. Is advocacies of being prudent, and I mean, it can change your whole world.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be a very destructive process. I think a lot of times people think, and with this sort of ayahuasca tourism boom, there's a lot of like, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to get this love and light energy and healing, and like maybe that happens for some people, but maybe some people go down there and they have their entire world crumbles to pieces. And by world, I mean their identity, their sense of self, their sense of who they are and their place in the world, what they believe, what they know to be true. That can be really challenging, which is why the prep and everything that you're talking about is super important. So yeah, I always tell people when they ask me, I say, look, you got to be ready for this. This is not, if you're wanting to go deep, you have to be really ready to die.
Yeah. And I analogize it to skydiving. One of my hobbies is skydiving, and I see people come to the drop zone, they call it, with free falling, and they'll show up and then they'll leave. Then they'll come back the next day. They'll walk around, maybe kick the tires of the airplane. And eventually one day they've done enough prep work. You can see they've done enough questioning, all the people that are jumping out, doing 150 miles an hour on a free fall. And they'll go, oh, I'm ready to tandem. And so the advocacy, as we're speaking about who's ready and who's not, it's an incremental process. It's a process that needs to take baby steps, and whatever that individual needs to prepare for it. Because at the end of the day, you could be free falling, your parachute might not open and you're dead, or someone might save you. And so we have to be mindful of what we need to do that experience. Right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oftentimes I hear people will say, well, I've done 3 grams, so I think I'm ready for 5 grams of psilocybin now. Or, oh man, I really got to do 10. Or, you hear this guy, Kalindi Lee, talking about eating 40 grams. I mean, that is mind-boggling to me, when I'm thinking. And so I wonder is there sort of a hierarchy that one needs to sort of, because you're talking about incremental, and I agree too, like, get yourself familiar with the space, get yourself familiar. If you've never left your hometown, go to the next town over, see what that's like before going to, Korea.
Right.
So, but in terms of like, when, say, someone is, working with this in an intentional way, is there a linear path in terms of like dosage and depth, or is it really just kind of based upon what you need and what you're looking for at that particular time?
Yeah, I think that's a 2-pronged question, and it's I'll speak to it from my personal vantage point as a clinician, and then recreationally. I think people, first of all, need to open up to their intuition, what their intuitive desire is. If they have history or a historical background with it, Mike, then at least they know what kind of the fundamental starting blocks are. If they've never done it before, obviously the advice is to talk to someone, do the appropriate research. But my vantage point is what I call a psycho-integrative dose. Like, I love, Terence McKenna, and I hear him at the beginning of your introduction, and I think he's an advocate. 5 grams is one thing, 40 grams, I don't even understand that, to be honest with you. And what I'm trying to say is we need to be able to integrate it rather than psychodissociative dose. If we're like out and we're way beyond Pluto, and what I see with clients is they come back on a heavy dose and they don't know what's going on. They're disconnected from the experience. And that's what I call a psychodissociative dose. That's unique to each person based off of both experience and emotional and psychological kind of curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the psychointegrative dose, within like 3 to 5 grams, you can do a shit ton of work within that and not need to be like going out any further, in my opinion. And that's just from my vantage point, and it's my personal experience, that there should be something to be able to come back with to digest, right?
So, yeah, something to bring back, right?
Right. I mean, I've always been confused, and I understand, and I honor the lineage, and I don't get it. But like when people are doing a dose here and then taking 2 days off or do a dose, there's no sober time to digest the first experience. Right. Sometimes I hear that with people coming back from ayahuasca ceremonies. They had 4 ceremonies. The first one blew their head off. And then before you know it, like the 4th and 5th one, they don't even remember what happened the first one. And oftentimes that's reported. And that's kind of alarming to me, because that could be some fruitful information, low-hanging fruit that could be potentially worked with. So that's just a vantage point. But, if people want to do it, that's follow their intuition.
Yeah. Well, no, that's good. I think that listening to that intuition, because a lot of times, it also brings up kind of like, safety in the space as well, which you mentioned also, and there's a lot of people now saying, oh, I'll sit for you, or I'm a guide, or, I know about integration, or, I've had a couple experiences, so, I could kind of tell you what's up. But it brings up like the efficacy, like, of the whole kind of, procedure here. And so like, or procedure, not procedure, but,
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So
for sure.
Yeah. The experience, the holding space and all, and everything that's entailed with that. So, I suppose that it would be a good idea for people to, and this is what I always try and do, is do the research, read, but like measure within myself. Does this match my intuitive feelings? Would you say that that's like a good way to kind of go about it? Because there's so much research out there, especially when people who don't know, and they're just saying, oh, well, this person says this and they seem credible, so I'm just going to go with that.
Right. And I think your prudency around your intuition is vital. And I also think, culturally speaking, right now, because of this gold rush of psychedelics, which is cool, and I honor it and I love it, my concern is it's a little bit egoic, in the sense that when Terence McKenna said 5 grams, and then now all these people are just blowing by that by saying, well, my heroic dose is 15 dried. And I'm like, full disclosure, what the fuck? Like, what's the ego in that? Like, what aren't you getting in the darkness of 5 grams? And please inform me, please help me. And I'd love to listen and open up dialogue. But culturally speaking, it's trying to, the one-up sensation of, oh, I'm going to do, this huge dose of psilocybin, or my latest is, what I hear a lot of people is defining what a microdose is. And I'm like blown away. I'm like, no, you're not supposed to feel it, as Fadiman talks about. But why
sub-perceptual dose? Yeah.
Right. Why are the walls melting when you're microdosing? Help me better understand that. And what are you running away from? Like, the question would be then too, what are you running away from? What is it that you can't do within this realm, right? Psychically or emotionally or psychologically, with a 5 gram dose, or be it, 200, mics. I don't know. It's a question that I'm open to dialogue. I would just love to learn more of the vantage point of why we're doing 40.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, there's only one person that's doing that and talking about that.
And more power to him, but it's interesting.
It is interesting. Because I wonder, because he talks about learning things, or even mentions like encountering malevolent entities and, all these kinds of things. And, drawing comparisons between the DMT realm and the psilocybin realm. I mean, we talk about all these realms, but really, are they separate realms? Like, where are they? They're in our minds. They're in with the substance. Each substance brings its own sort of space that we can play in, but ultimately we're going to an altered state experience, right? I mean, or is this like, I kind of have a hard time sort of wrapping my head around like these different realms like of existence, and like, do people report the same things? Now, are people reporting the same things because they've heard other people talk about those things and they're bringing that into the experience and they're projecting that, and those are the symbols that make sense to them and how they can make sense of the experience? Like, there's so many questions around this.
There are so many questions, and this is just a shout out to what you're doing with this podcast. Yeah. It's educational, it's informed, and it's a prudency of kind of checking in like with just everyone's vantage point. And that's what I love about what you're doing here, because at the end of the day, there's so much information via the internet, and there's so much information of people wanting to like read something and then do it themselves. And more power to them, and I'm really appreciative of it, but please do it with some sort of scope of pragmatic, like, okay. And that goes back to the preparation. Why I ask the question all the time, speaking of your purpose, reflect on what you got out of the last one. What's your expectation for this one? And ultimately, potentially, what could happen? That's my PREP acronym. I broken record. Purpose, reflect on what the past one did, and is it resolved or unresolved? What's your expectation for this coming up journey? And potentially, what could happen? Are you prepared to see, Kali rip you apart and say you're done? You know what I mean? It's a thing.
Well, that's interesting that you brought that up, because that's sort of in that preparation state. Like, there's certain people that will just say, "Well, I don't want to think about that because I don't want to bring any negative thoughts into this space." But I mean, I don't know. Thoughts shape reality. Okay, I get that, right? But how much, like, we have to be willing to sort of acknowledge at least that we're fully surrendering to the experience.
Right.
So when you're fully surrendering the experience, you have to make a pact with yourself, or a covenant of like, I'm willing to just totally open up to whatever is.
Yeah, totally.
Right. Otherwise, maybe setting intentions. Like, I remember down in Peru at the ayahuasca center, a lot of people would say, "Yeah, I'm just going to set an intention. Like, I just want to experience love." And like the next night, they're like, "Yeah, I just want to experience like, desire, love, like, passion, these kinds of things." And maybe they're really like keeping that anchor point so focused on that thing that they're trying to contain the experience is what I'm getting at. Right. And then maybe you're never going to those depths that you really need.
Yeah, and so a lot of times what I speak about is a combination of it's a funnel. Like, we want to make sure that it's not too general to the point that we're unable to we have like 17 different intentions, and then we're like jumbled by what we got out of it. And we don't want to be like honed into like what you're just saying, so specific that we have like the blinders on, that we don't see everything else coming our way because we're so looking. And I see that a lot with the experiences. People will have this real honed attention or intention, and they are alarmed that they didn't see anything else because they didn't see what they were looking for. Mm-hmm. And so I invite the combination of an intention and an inner healer. And Stan talks about the inner healer, and I love the inner healers. Then be open to the experience. It's like watching a movie. The first time you see it, you see one thing. The 10th time you see it, you see 15 other things. We can't walk with blinders, right? And that's the value of metaphors is, okay, so you can have an intention, but also be open to surrendering to what is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I love about psychedelics is it's full of contradictions. We can be hypocrites, and we can go, this works for one thing and this doesn't work for the other. You have to kind of, again, personalize it.
Personalize it, totally. I mean, there's nothing more personal.
Right.
I can't think of anything else that's more personal.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, and then you must get a lot of questions, I guess, about bad trips, right? I think that that's probably a concern, because I definitely do. When talking to people who are unfamiliar about psychedelics, and they'll, oh well, I'm worried. I don't want to have a bad trip. And a lot of people have talked about this, and I know, Zendo makes the distinction between bad trip and challenging experience, and these different kinds of things. But ultimately, if we're going in with an intention or a purpose for healing, there's probably going to be some shit in there.
Without a doubt. And one of the things I tethered to, Mike, and it's a great question about bad trips, is there was an amazing dream expert, Jeremy Taylor. And Jeremy Taylor would say, similar to Zendo, there's no such thing as a bad dream, only information that's given, right? And so it's a non-judgmental base. Right. And Terrence and also his brother Dennis talk about these as compounds. They're neutral compounds. We're bringing in the persecution of judgment to these compounds. And so if we can really keep that conversation open of saying, okay, these are neutral compounds. Yeah, I might have some bad stuff I have to work with. That's healing. Right. It's like going through rather than around. I talk about what are we going to and what are we going through. And it could be some tough stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it could be. And I think, and there's always tough stuff, I think that even the people that are doing, like I look at some of the ayahuasqueros and the Shipibo people that I was with, and I mean they're encountering tough stuff. Like people think they've got it all figured out. I mean they're encountering tough stuff too. You have to. I think you have to know all of the tough stuff that's coming up for everybody else as well. So this notion of being someone who's like a completely healed person, I'm not sure if I necessarily think that's. I think it's fluid.
It's 100% fluid. It's 100% fluid. And if anyone in the world, be it therapeutically or personally, says that it's going to go away, they're full of bullshit. I believe trauma, grief, loss, resentments, healing storylines, past life regressions, that it's always going to be within us. It's how we manifest it and giving it more breath and more space to look at it. And it's the classic example. They say a psychedelic experience will give you what was in your face trauma or grief and broaden it out to that 35,000 foot viewpoint. It's what I use the term of a teapot. The tea kettle is water. It moves into steam and it dissipates into something else. The molecules are changing. The space is bigger and the steam goes out into a bigger space. It's just like any grief. And I have a hard time when people hold on to that. It's that magic pill again, that something's it just seems contradicting, go away from you. It's just like going to leave you. That storyline, you have to honor that storyline. To go back to your idea of bad trips, where in the world can't you honor that? Just like when we were talking about death and that Stoic Catholic kind of viewpoint of now everyone's going to cry for 24 hours and then you got to get back to work.
Yeah.
Let's give some space to honor it, revere it, and ritualize it, be it bad, good, or indifferent. Really ritualize it, and that's a part of it.
Yeah, I mean that it just brings into it's just like this is the whole thing, right? I mean, this is a way of life,
right?
This is a path. This is a path for people who in my opinion, want to really live in the raw juice of the experience of life. And the only way to do that is to go to the depths, but the same kind of capacity that you have for living at the highs is going to be, you're going to feel it at those lower lows. Like you said, the space increases. It's like you go from riding a bicycle to driving, a truck. It's
right.
Just, you got more responsibility. There's more there. You're still driving, yep. But it's, and that brings a question. That's a lot of personal responsibility. And that personal responsibility requires a lot of time, and that time isn't allotted to us. Like you were saying, like one day to grieve and then you go back to work. I think in the DSM, they were saying that like, oh yeah, 2 weeks is good enough for
Bereavement.
Bereavement and things like that. And it's like, what? How is this acceptable?
Right. And I think that's the westernized vantage point that we have to challenge, both not just in psychedelic work, but what I call psychedelic lifestyle, right? Not walking around high all day long, but integrating it in the way you parent, integrate it in the way you relate to people. One of the blessings we have in such a divisive culture right now is to challenge ourselves to show up, right? Be it with our children, be it with our coworkers, be it with our partners, be it with our spouses. It's like, fuck, what a great opportunity to live psychedelically without walking around stoned all day long. You know what I mean? And be like, this is what I got from these psychedelic experiences. And now how am I going to integrate and implement them?
Yeah. Psychedelic escapism.
Right.
Or psychedelic materialism.
Right. It's pretty wild.
Bypassing. I mean, these things, I think there's so much here, like, in terms of what you're saying about like the ego and, that there's a tendency, I think, for a lot of people to think, well, yeah, I take a lot of psychedelics and I'm, I meditate and stuff. So I'm good. Like my ego's not in this game. I mean,
all the while doing 16 grams instead of 5 or doing, it's cool. It's all good.
And I hear ego death a lot of the times. Like, people talk about the dying of the ego. What's your take on that?
The dying of the ego is a great wonderment for me. I don't know. I think my interchange I have is the impermanence we live with of humility. Like when I hear dying of the ego, I ask a person, well, what's your relationship to humility? What's your, and when I say relationship to humility here now in this concrete sequential life? And what would it look like to not know your ego, right? And so then I get to like use classical therapy and start to explore philosophically, well, what does it serve you to have an ego death? Where will it bring you? What will you come back with? What's your relationship then? And that's, again, speaking on why it's so important, because we have a very short time here. What's the humility you're going to walk with? If you have a death ego or an ego death, tell me what the outcome is going to look like. Bring me to what your everyday manifestation of an ego death is going to give you while you're here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's like the ego of the ego death.
Right. So then you're like, okay, great, I got it. And that's what I have. A lot of people come into my office is they're seeking that. I'm going to go down to Peru because I want an ego death, or I'm going to go to Amsterdam, I want an ego death, or I'm going to go into my basement. So, okay, great. So when you get that and you check that off, it's like living up to the Joneses. So then what's your next, what, I'm going to do. And I hear that with a lot of people, Mike. They're like, I had this experience with psilocybin. I'm going to do DMT now. Okay. So when you check that off, what's next? I'm going to do Bufo or 5-MeO because I heard that's a non-binary and I'm going to ego disillusion with. Great. So when you get there, then what's next? And more cases than that, they're like, I need to go do a 4-cup ceremony with, Peru. Okay. And tell me how that's going to serve you. And it's not to be, an asshole, but it's to explore, well, what do we keep going towards? Mm-hmm. And so this is why I love our conversation today, is it goes full circle back to Alan Watts. So is it time to put the phone down temporarily and chew on it, right? Is it time, and is it time to go, okay, have I incorporated all this in my life? And why isn't this working for me too? What am I grasping at? What's the, to use Buddhism, what's the hungry ghost that I'm trying to fulfill?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think everyone has one too.
Without a doubt.
And it manifests in different ways, in many different ways, psychedelic or not psychedelic. You see it happening all over the place. I got to ask, where does astrology come into to this?
Well,
because I've always been fascinated by it. And, certain people in my lives have been into it. And I guess I've my main resistance has always been I don't like some outside force dictating my destiny.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily feel that way now. I have a broader scope of what I believe it to be, but I'm wondering, what, because you mentioned it in the book and you talk about it, and it's pretty fascinating, and the people that you bring up and their things that they have to say about it.
Yeah. And so before I go deeper into astrology, a lot of these suggestions are suggestions. And I believe astrology is a suggestion. So I think I use archetypal astrology under the idea of Rick Tarnas and the cosmos and psyche. Stan is a firm believer. And so under the lineage of Stan myself, I gravitated towards it. And through my dissertation, and when I was doing my PhD work, I started to recognize my psychedelic experiences were interesting after I would read my chart. And so I wouldn't use my birth chart or my transits as a juncture for my psychedelic experience. Oftentimes I would read them after and see if there was anything that was alignment, or, it's like pulling a tarot card. You can make sense out of everything. Everyone can justify everything. So the cautionary tale, Mike, is I honor and totally respect. Yeah, astrology, you can make sense out of everything, and you can, justify it and put it in a compartment. The idea behind astrology is it's also a system that can give answers to. So it's just another tool for someone, and to get into the theory, left brain, right brain. Maybe you're more right brained and you want more esoteric things. So then it could give you a permission to consider, hey, this is more, philosophical, not so much science. And it challenges the ideas of what we see. If it works for you, it works for you. A lot of what Stan saw was there was planetary alignments during these big things that are related to his birth natal processes, right? The perinatal. So he actually then overlapped astrology with birth things, such as, so if there's like a constriction of Saturn or a Pluto uprising, that could manifest in your psychedelic session.
Right. And these are very, these are ancient things.
Totally.
So there's something there, obviously, right? To say the least. But it goes back to sort of this making it personal to you and kind of choosing the sort of, like flavor of your experience and coloring it in a way that feels comfortable to you. So with psychedelic use, and I guess like the then integration of it, I'm curious about the history in terms of like psychedelic use and planets and like the lunar cycle and the seasons and all these sorts of things, because it seems like there's a lot there that sort of doesn't really get brought up, and you're kind of bringing it up here, and I think it's pretty cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I want people to have an expressive experience that makes it align to them, so they can go, oh yeah, this relates to me, right? So when I started to do the astrology, and now I'm big into astrology and tarot, and before you know it, like I've got like all this shit, but I just release it. If it kind of gives that ritualistic side of things. Historically speaking, many cultures have been doing this, and so to appreciate and honor their rituals makes it that much more enjoyable. And I believe the more we do it systematically, we start to see kind of evidence being built upon it. So every time I'll do a birth chart with a client, we might find some nuances of, oh, hey, wow, so there's a real alignment of Venus and Mars. So there's a lot of feminine, masculine energy, and not to get into astrology here, but they're in conjunction with each other. So that might bring up this deep kind of violent. You see what I mean?
It might be like a catalyst for triggering a certain kind of emotional state, memory, regret, something like that.
Potentially.
Yeah. Okay.
And at the end of the day, there's a lot of just playing with it, right? There's a lot of priming. So without the term manipulation, it's priming. We're just inviting. So I can't tell somebody if they want to bring, some rose quartz crystal into the session, or if they want to burn sage. That's going to prime something within them, right? That's theirs to prime. For me, I think it's, anecdotal. For me, I have certain preparation and ideas that I want to kind of give myself some depth to explore.
Mm-hmm.
It could be something as simple as historical representation of the clinical stuff too. A lot of people like the physics stuff, they want the science, the new science, the Akashic records. They want to know, physics. They want to talk about black holes and shit. And if that's their trip, that's their trip.
Yeah, totally. And we have so much to draw upon. I mean, like we live in such an amazing age where the access to information and knowledge, it's a lot of it is available. I wouldn't say maybe all, maybe there's some secret stuff that's
maybe
locked away. Yeah.
That's at the 47 grams. 47 grams unlocked, like Mario Brothers or some shit. It's like the next level of the.
Yeah, go to your local Masonic lodge and take 50 grams, and you'll find something. But yeah. So like, what is there a particular sort of ancient or historical ritual process or ceremonial aspect that really that you connect with, or that you appreciate, or think is pretty cool?
Yeah, I advocate with preparation. I'm a fond believer of fasting. I think fasting 24 hours before a session sets, again, the term I like to use is priming, starts reverence. It builds reverence and respect. I love cleansing ritual of water. So I invite the elements quite often, bringing in a bath or a shower the day of, and just kind of really the purification process. Gentle walks. It starts to sound like, wow, dude, Ryan, you have like a 6-hour preparation process before you dive. That's not what I'm saying. It's the idea of using the elements, right? Bringing in the elements, maybe the night before setting a fire, right? If you have a fire pit outside, or if you connect with certain elements, bring those elements into your life.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be all, it's not like witchcraft or doctoring up, like bringing in all the energies, but finding something through elements. I believe, to answer your question in a different way, use the 4 elements, use your 5 senses, start to work with your 5 senses, because as we know, psychedelics plays within synesthesia. So you're hearing, taste, and you're seeing flavors and different things. So making sure that you're honing your flavor profile, your senses, your eyesight, so you know what's real, right? Really exploring the sounds. So when you do take your medicine or you do work with it recreationally, that you're grounded in knowing what was and what is.
Yeah. Oh, that's my next question. What is?
What is? So you tell me. I don't even know. Where are we, right? What is? Well, it's for me, again, it's physicality. It's going back to preparing yourself with, okay, this is what I know I'm challenged with mentally. Emotionally, this is my safe, like kind of homeostasis. Checking in with homeostasis. What is what's my orbit right now? So then I have kind of a litmus test of, and what is the prudency of me is the healthy sitter that's sober. That's a sober sitter that you trust intimately. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned most recently is the sitters need to be having a therapeutic relationship, a friendship, because the person can dive deeper. One of the biggest things I've noticed is that people that don't have a tight relationship, if there's a sitter or if they're recreationally exploring, it's going to always kind of either limit the experience or it's going to bring up challenges because of the trust. And an advocacy I have today and recently is you have to have a tight relationship with the person you're sitting with or exploring recreationally with, because it's going to only give you more space to dive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the questions that I love the most are, and I think that's why I'm so fascinated by psychedelic experience, and I would assume probably you too, is who are we? Why are we here? What should we do? And how can we make things better? And yeah, maybe I'd like to hear like some of your thoughts around those these big metaphysical situations or conundrums or predicaments that we sort of find ourselves in. I used to sort of be in this state of like sort of wobbling existential paralysis where I was like, man, like especially after my first big ayahuasca experience, I just was like, okay, what the hell, and yeah. So yeah, I'm wondering just, I mean, I guess your subjective opinion, right? It's like,
Yeah, and
what do
thank
we,
you. Go
yeah.
ahead.
No,
The
I was
the
just going to say what we're doing here. Yeah.
what are we doing here is a great question. What recently, personally, being subjective, has come up for me is reassurance of compassion, of walking in someone else's shoes, learning to, no matter what their thought process is having the courage. I've been learning to have a dialogue with people that don't have the same like-mindedness that I am walking with, being open to the challenges that they can offer you with openness. Recently, I had a profound experience of deep connection to the environment, the soil. And so I'm deeply embedded with walking with a more precarious responsibility to our planet.
Mm-hmm.
Actively, psychologically, I'm challenged by mental health and just seeing how there's so much trauma in the world and what we can do to bring light to it. It's a never ending conversation.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I've come to peace with what's going to happen after whatever that is, be it me hanging out on planet Jupiter or wherever I go, to hanging out with different spirits I've met on this life. That to me is a constant reminder of why I love psychedelics, is its reassurance for preparation of death. And I move backwards of leaving a gentler footprint with love. Love leads, man. That's, it sounds like a hippie cliche statement, but I do listen to the Grateful Dead. So it's love leads. It's
Yeah.
all it is.
Well, I mean, if yeah, I guess Jesus and Buddha were hippies then, right? Because it all circles back to these, what a lot of the religions of the world and the bigger ones are saying, which is, do unto others as you would do unto yourself, and
Totally.
The having compassion and love, and and it's just it all circles back to that. So it's like, at the end of the day, as far out as you can get and go and to all these places, really, when we're talking about walking in this world, being kind and being open. Yeah.
And giving, and also being, and that's not to be like steamrolled, but having critical conversations with people of like-mindedness and of different-mindedness. I think all too often today we're so easily, especially with social media and all the other stuff on the internet, is we're quick to isolate ourselves with everybody that's like-minded. So then all of a sudden the conversation's just churning of, oh yeah, I resonate all over you. I'm going to resonate all over you. You're the best. Everything's cool. And then you fight against the opposition.
Mm.
Well, I love Marshall Rosenblum, who wrote Nonviolent Communication. Let's open up a factual dialogue with people and communicate our feelings, our needs, and what we're requesting. And if both sides of the party are emotionally intelligent enough, we can have a very, very beautiful conversation. Yeah. It might be challenging as hell, but it will be leading towards something.
Yeah, and isn't that what this is all about in a certain way too? I mean, what would life be without the diversity and novelty of experience coming through subjective eyes, in billions of different ways?
Right.
So, consciousness experiencing itself subjectively from the multiple points of view, I think is there's something to be built out of that. We could build something beautiful, or we could, really fuck things up. I think that, I prefer the former.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. It's important to have that awareness, for sure.
Yeah. So, you're obviously, the work that you do, you're in a realm of like, people that are into this stuff, but you mentioned that you kind of try and have conversations with people that are different minded, and I do too. How does that go sometimes though? Because it almost feels like sometimes when you're talking to somebody that's so different that they can't really, there's no sort of bridge to get them to understand your worldview or where you're coming from. I think we see that play out, in our politics and everything
all over the place, right? And I'm not to say that it works every time, and I wouldn't dare say that, but as a psychedelic integration therapist that advocates for psychedelics, as well as I'm also a sex therapist that talks a lot about some pretty sexual, like, open conversations, the biggest thing that I come up against is people needing to seek more understanding. And so because I'm already in a position of with these kind of open ideas and these concepts that might already be pushed back, say someone thinks psychedelics is drugs, for example. Well, already I'm kind of only standing on one foot. My advocacy for people and my invitation to people is I need to seek more understanding from them. What is it that they don't fucking understand about my position? And I challenge myself then to become more articulate, more open, and more suggestible to my. And then what's the greatest part? Then it asserts me to go, okay, yeah, I really do fucking believe what I'm saying. They might not understand it. So now I need to find a different formula, a different way of speaking, but I have to ask them, what is it that they're missing? What parts of using psychedelics for medicine and healing don't you understand? Then at least I have a benchmark. I can go, okay, it's drugs. You were raised in the 50s. You see it as, the Reagan era of, DARE, whatever. Okay, now I can go somewhere with that. If I just assume to get on my, soapbox and just start blabbing, I don't know where they're at. And so again, seeking understanding of where they're at is vital to me. Then I can at least go, okay, this is how articulate I am. Or maybe it catches me and says, wow, Ryan, you're a hypocrite. You need to challenge yourself on that thought process.
Yeah. I didn't know you were also a sex therapist.
Yeah. So I'm a sex therapist that works within sexual trauma, sexual addiction, and they're quite a beautiful intersection. I see a lot of psychedelic working helping with sexual healing and sexual trauma, and as well as sexual addiction. So really kind of advocate for two kind of parallel processes at this moment.
Yeah, because like I was mentioning before about how it's like, or we were talking about it being psychedelic experience being the most personal experience you could have. I mean, I guess the second one I would say would be a sexual experience. Like
it's super.
Yeah. And it's just and a lot of the times there is unfortunately there is a lot of sexual trauma that comes up, and that can be really painful and difficult, and even maybe like repressed memories that then pop up, and then how do you deal with that? And
right, and that's where I think the intersection for me has been a very big blessing, as I'm able to walk both kind of lines. I can feel into what that might be like, as well as the precarious judgment that both of these kind of realms offer. There's so much judgment in our culture around sexuality now and psychedelics that it gives a really open space for people to feel safe and not judged, and kind of still discern what their feelings are, what their experiences have been.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally. I mean, you're judged as, whatever, a slut or whatever it can be, or even judged as a druggie, a hippie, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, a lot of judgment, but in the work that you're doing and the book that you put together, it's really like, kind of trying to outline basically all of the ways in which one can go about properly preparing and then exploring and, making sense of these things, because, that's what we need to do. Oftentimes people ask me about, the psychedelic experience and stuff, or what is needed. And I just say, really right now, it's just great to just be open and educate, because then when it's not as, maybe you'll be less to judge, like you were just saying with the conversations.
Right, without a doubt. And I deeply appreciate this conversation for that reason. I like to say, if you've never been to India, there's no explanation given. If you've been to India, there's also no explanation given. And it's the same with psychedelics. If you've never tried psychedelics, I can't give you the explanation. You can go do it, and then you'll have your own explanation. But I'm not going to superimpose what your expectation is or what the outcome's going to be. I'm going to give you enough freedom to go, okay, am I ready for it? Yes, then do it. And then here I'll give you kind of a platform to look at. And that's what the book's all about, is really cultivating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cultivate it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a process, right?
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, there's so much. And I think that when you're embarking on a process, there's a tendency to sort of wanting to be kind of postmarking your way along, but it doesn't always go in a linear path, right?
Absolutely not. No way.
I've noticed this personally, like even recently, like I was dealing with some really kind of heavy stuff, and I'm like, cool, I thought I moved past this, but now all of a sudden it's reemerging. What the hell? I'm back to position one. I thought it was like I thought the stages of grief went in this order. Like, why am I back here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so having that awareness, then you can do something with it, right?
Yeah.
And if the minute I think that's where we start to build shame and guilt for ourselves, is we're like, oh goodness, I didn't pass that benchmark, or I went past that kind of guidepost. I should be evolved. That's where I like to use the term acclimation, right? Climbing Mount Everest, you don't just go from the bottom to the top. There's an acclimating point. And what I've learned through my own research about that is more people are dying going down because they think they hit the summit and they're fucking like the best. Well, you have to be prudent about your acclimation. So if it's with grief or trauma or healing or spiritual emergence, there's an acclimating point at every given level, even after you think you made it to the top. That's where humility comes in, and you're just like, okay, what do I need to do? Who do I need help from? Reaching out for support. What can I do by myself?
This is huge. Yeah, I've oftentimes struggled with this myself too, because it's like I get the message, I hang up the phone, and I go, I like to solve problems. So I go, oh, I get it. I see how this Rubik's Cube works. I figured it out. Totally cool. I could put that and start working on something else, right? But then and it's a tendency to be like, well, I've been experienced with this, but we really need each other. I mean, the community. Totally. And why are other people here other than to lean on for support and for community and for connection, right? That's a massive part of this thing, I think, because oftentimes people ask me about my experience down in Peru, and I'll say, really one of the things that I remember the most is the community, the friendships, the connection.
Yep. It's very interwoven, and I think it becomes isolating. And if you're not talking with each other, it goes back to the analogy of we're not all just teachers, we're also students. And the minute you stop being a student, that's kind of a conundrum of, hey, what are you shutting away off? What are you shutting from? What are you turning away from? And being open to suggestion, being open to people supporting you. I mean, the community at large, especially this community, it's so, so wonderful. But it's a matter of reaching out and saying, hey, this is where I want. This is what I need. This is what I'm looking for. Can you support me in this?
Yeah. And a little bit of like you said, humility and vulnerability too,
right.
To say like, oh, hey, look, I know that you might think that I'm in this position of experience or authority or credibility, but I'm struggling with something and I need help. Right. I mean,
right.
That's a big part of it too. Yeah.
Tons of it. And that's what I loved about your word earlier, is the symbiosis of it. We're all different, but yet we're interwoven. And it's a fantastic journey to embark on with each other.
Fantastic planet. So what was your favorite part of, I want to ask you two questions. I'll just start with one. I won't give you the two-pronged thing, but yeah. So what was your favorite, most exciting part of the book? And I guess that ties into like your favorite, most exciting, fun, the thing that really gets your neurons all tickled and firing up, that you really like to dive into and talk about and write about, and you could do it endlessly.
Sure.
What is that for you?
Well, the favorite part. So this book was self-published, and the book is designed as a notebook, and I've gotten a lot of feedback of when's it going to be on Kindle. And my favorite part about it is I created it the way it is. So it's a huge notebook with a white cover. I want people to make it their own. I want people to get it a little dirty. I did the art. It's from top to bottom. It's been a labor of love. And I just want people to make it their own. So color on it, do whatever, write notes in it. And that is my favorite part, is the opportunity to give it to somebody and create. Love it. The self-publishing was it's crazy. Publishing paper is expensive. That was a little weird. What I love to write about, and what I could write about endlessly, I love writing about the idea of what's on the horizon, what the prudent. People are like, oh, he must be such a psychedelic advocate, and he wants to talk about like psychedelics all day long. What I want to do is I love writing about making people think outside the box of, hey, maybe I don't need this all the time. And can I do it recreationally? Can I do it? And I love writing about that. It seems so divisive right now, Mike, recreation versus therapeutic. And I'm just a mutt right in between. And I think there's value in both. So trying to explore what the value of recreational use is, what the value of therapeutic use is. And it's a constant evolving, churning experience. How to show up with your parenting. I have a 14-year-old and I'm like, oh, how am I going to talk about this? She can read. Her friends can Google me. So writing about prudent ways to really, and I know you teach young kids too. So it's the idea of how do we articulate our expression so we're not evoking recreational craziness, but honor and reverence, right? Because they're so brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So a lot of that writing is towards the children. I want to write to give them kind of a forum of, how to do it safe, sane, and, consensual.
Oh man, that's great. Yeah. I mean, cause you're talking about on the horizon. I mean, who else is on the horizon than the people that are coming after us, the next generation.
Yeah.
And I wish that I had, the knowledge, the sane, like you said, knowledge and the appropriate, proper education of what drugs are and what psychedelics are and what altered states are and who these people are. It wasn't until later in life that I found I didn't learn this in school.
Right.
And I didn't learn how to use my mind and how to think and what trauma is and all this stuff. So I can only imagine kids getting into this kind of stuff now in a proper manner are going to be so much more well equipped and deepening themselves into the wholeness and totality of what a human being and a human experience can be within interpersonal connections, community, society at large. Man,
Yeah.
This is world changing.
It's super world changing, and our children are the answer to that because we didn't have dance safe back then, and gratitude to these, but they're answering it. They're playing with some prescription drugs. They're doing, but they need to be continuously educated. And what I'm recognizing is they're at least open minded to have the dialogue. They're not afraid of it. They're not insecure about what about the medicines is different than Xanax, for example, or what's different than codeine, for example. They're able to see with a real formulated intelligence. They're like, okay, I understand plant medicines versus this, or recognizing synthetics versus organic. It's a fundamentally amazing conversation to have with the youth.
Yeah, I think we're shifting out of the kind of fear-based dominator control paradigm that's been in existence since the dawn of civilization and
Right.
Religions and government, all this kind of stuff. It's just the cat's out of the bag. More and more people are waking up, and when you have people informed and educated at a young age, they're not going to go back. They're not going to go. They're not going to buy into the fear-based trickery. Yeah, Ryan, thank you so much for being here. I feel like I definitely would like to have you on again because I want to I want to read the entire book, and it's so good, and it's like it's like 400 and something pages, and oftentimes having someone else on the show, and he wrote a book called The Secret Drugs of Buddhism, and people are sending me stuff all the time, so it's like anyway, but I would love to know, maybe we can close off on some things about you. What do you do? What are your sort of daily practices or ways in which you find yourself kind of showing up fully in the world? I guess, maybe outside of the psychedelic experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be outside, but it doesn't have to be focused on it either. Just maybe some thoughts or practices or ideas or habits that you put into play that kind of help you stay consistent and showing up and being able to serve and give and put your work out there and do the best that you can.
Well, I appreciate it, Mike. And before I do that, I just want to thank you. This has been an awesome conversation, and the gratitude I have is amazing for the platform. You're doing awesome work.
Thank you.
I think extending myself with gratitude is a challenge that needs to be a daily challenge. And that's one of the things I work with and find peace in. I think the idea of rest in between, we have this tendency today in our culture of go, 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 consuming and digesting without processing. So I want to just release the idea of just continuously tackling more and more and more. And so my latest ritual is attempting to kind of minimize grabbing at things and really just honoring the simplicity, finding ways to stay simple, participating, in basics. I'm completely captivated with, just that minimalistic lifestyle, trying to work that. I think it's an ever flowing opportunity. And when living in Minneapolis, challenging myself to get out in the dark in the snow, it's like, finding all the elements to be really rewarding. The psychedelics have taught me that, the seasons and everything. Just really trying to meet more and more people and having healthy conversations.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, every time you say something, I always feel like I get a new thought. But yeah, like meeting new people and having conversations. And I'm just thinking about the psychedelic experience and the kind of, what we experience in that realm. And it's like meeting new and experiencing new.
Right.
So it's like bringing that into the world. I mean, people are psychedelic. The world is psychedelic. So it's like that in and of itself is a portion that you could bring back to really infuse that sort of landscape into the everyday life by just meeting new people and talking to new people. Yeah, that's great.
And not being hesitant to flip over the rock that's already been flipped over and say, did I miss something? Right?
Yeah.
And the viewpoints, again, the watching the movie for the 5th time. Have I seen this before? Or is there something new that's being profoundly shown to me?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I've probably seen The Big Lebowski 25 times, and every time I watch it, I find something.
Right? It's the best. It's the best.
Awesome,
all the way down to the sweater and the flip-flops and the little white Russians. Let's rock it out.
Yeah. Dudism.
Right. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. It means a lot to me.
Yeah. Likewise. Let's do it again. Let's do another one.
I would love to.
I'd love to. Oftentimes I feel like when I'm talking to people that are so, have so much experience and knowledge that I feel like I'm like skating along the surface. I'm like, oh, am I asking good questions? Am I going in the right direction? So yeah, I'd love to dive even deeper when I have more under my belt.
I would love to. And honestly, it would be fun because I know I shared with you the sexuality component too. And I think that's one of the biggest kind of conundrums right now is helping people understand their sexuality through working with psychedelics and what that looks like. And it's kind of another rabbit trail all in of itself, and just healing specific trauma around that.
Definitely huge. So huge.
Yeah. Your work is, I love the diversity of it. Your podcast, it's fun to listen to all the different things and the topics. It's great.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm trying to really increase that diversity too this year and really just bring in more of it because it's much, much needed, I think. Yeah. And it's entertaining for me because I love learning about new things.
Yeah,
too.
I know. What an awesome position to be in.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ryan.
You're welcome.
For the people listening out there, it's the Psychedelics Integration Handbook. Ryan Westrum, thank you so much. And is there places where people should go? Should they go to a website or should they follow you? I think you're on Instagram. I know I see you on there. So tell the people where they can go.
Yeah, there's 3 kind of places. Of course, the Amazon monster. You can get the book on Amazon. We also have psychedelicintegration.net is where you could buy the book from my website. I have another website called Healing Souls, SOULS, LLC.com, where that is preliminary and primary sexuality as well as psychedelic information. And then my Instagram is Psychedelic Integration.
Awesome.
Yeah, this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Till next time, folks. Peace.
Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you did, go and leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a 5-star rating and a review if you feel like writing something. That would be great. It helps the show a lot, helps us bump us up in the Apple algorithm, get the podcast exposed to more people. So if you like the show, go ahead and do that. If you want to go a step further, go to patreon.com/Mike Brank. You can donate, become a patron, be a part of the Mycadelic Inner Sanctum WhatsApp chat group of people chatting and connecting all around the world. We're finding the others, bringing them together, creating community. One of my favorite things to offer. I also release bonus episodes. Sometimes I do episodes that are kind of raw and kind of beta test them for the producers of the show, which are my patrons, the people who support the show. Big shout out to everybody that's a patron. Thank you for your love and support. If you want to do a one-time donation, go to my website, mikebrank.com. Go to PayPal and do a one-time donation if you feel that. And I really like the method of donation. It's a gifting mentality, and reading Charles Eisenstein's books recently and his talks have really kind of made me embrace the spirit of the gift, of giving and gifting And what better time than this holiday season to be generous and to give. And, if you like the show, just tell people about it, spread it, share it. Also, contact me. Go to my email on my website, the contact page, mikebrank.com. Reach me on Instagram, Psychedelic_podcast. Hit me up on Facebook. Send me your messages. Send me your thoughts. Send me guest suggestions, ideas. Share your story with me. Reach out. Give me feedback. What do you like? What don't you like? And I love to hear from people. I always respond. So you can go ahead and do that. If you're interested in CBD, we have Hemp Bombs as a sponsor. You can go to hempbombs.com, get all kinds of CBD stuff. And I used to take their gummies. I think I'm going to start taking them again. I ran out, so I got to get some more. But they're really good. And check it out. If you're interested in CBD, you want to give it a try, put in the code Mike15 at checkout and get 15% off all of your CBD wants, desires, needs, and so forth. Big shout out to Danny Barnett and Galaxia for the music, the intro and the outro. And of course, thanks to Muse, who I mash up their song and put the Terrence McKenna clips and everything in without their permission, but somehow I'm still able to do it. So thanks, because I love that. And what else? I don't know. Thank you so much to everybody for your love and support, for listening. And I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, really can't express how grateful I am that out of all the podcasts out there that you choose this one to listen to. And like I said, let's really make this a collaborative effort. If there's something that you hear, that you notice, something going on with the show that you're like, hey, you used to do this or you do that, or I'd like to see this, or hey, did you ever think about that? Shoot me a message. I'm open. I communicate. I message back. I like this to be a collaborative effort. I want more community involved in this. So anyway, thanks. And till next time, peace.